Hey guys, as Coach said, I'm Grant Carter, and today I'm going to talk to you about communication. So, this isn't the normal talk I would give to athletes. So, you guys are the cream of the crop. You're going to college next year. You're going to have a great time at that, and I'm really happy for you. So, congratulations. So, today we're going to talk about communication at a little bit higher level. So a lot of you were team captains. A lot of you were the leaders of your teams. So I would say that you are pretty good at communicating already. You've had a lot of experience with it, and you've had to motivate, you've had to mentor, you've had to develop, you've had to build teams, and you did that through communication. So one question I want to ask you is, what was your leadership style? How did you lead? Were you more of a verbal leader, or were you more of a nonverbal leader? Did you lead by actions, but weren't really the cheerleader type, or were you a mix of both? So I want you to think about that throughout our talk today, because that's going to help frame a lot of the different things we're going to discuss going forward. We're going to talk about verbal and nonverbal communication specifically, and we're also going to talk about the process, how people both think about what they're going to say and portray it, and also how people receive what you say, because both have very important meanings. You have to be able to receive it, and you have to be able to send what you want to portray to them. And sometimes people will accept that different ways and learn from it different ways. So we're going to get through that, and it's going to be a good talk. So please, by all means, ask any questions that you have throughout. I want this to be a very back and forth talk today. All right, so let's talk about the two-way communication process. It starts with the sender and ends with the receiver, and then cycles backwards with the receiver giving confirmation back to the sender. So what the sender does is they develop an idea, and we're going to use the example of a quarterback. So the quarterback receives a play from the coach. So now that quarterback has to develop what the coach has just given them and try to get that out to the players. So they get the idea, which they're not really developing, but they're in this instance they're just receiving it from the coach and have to give that out to their teammates. So they receive it, they develop the idea. Then they have to encode it. They have to take it from the knowledge that they have from the coach and decide how they are going to portray that out to their teammates. Could be in different ways. So that's that movement from developing the idea to the encoder. Then they have to transmit it. So what they've encoded is the fact that they're going to transmit the play out to the wide receivers through hand and arm signals, and then to their offensive line for a verbal call. It then goes to the receiver. Now it has to go through the barriers, and we're going to get into those a little bit later, but it goes through the barriers and then gets received on the other end from the offensive line, wide receivers, tight end, running back. It gets received by all of them, and then they start to decode it. So the encoding process was how they packaged it up. The decoding process is the unpackaging of that. So that individual on the other end is going to unpackage what they received from the quarterback. Now, sometimes that unpackaging could be hands go up because they don't understand what the quarterback's trying to say, and then it starts the process all over again. But they start to unpackage it. Then they accept it. So they accept it with probably a nonverbal or verbal communication back. That could be movement on the line. That could be different types of things before the play is actually snapped. And then the use is going to be when the ball is hiked from the center to the quarterback. And then they go and they actually use what they just received from the quarterback. So then the receiver gives the feedback, and that feedback is running the correct routes, doing the correct blocking schemes, and things like that. So if you look at the whole picture, just that one communication has multiple steps that it goes through, and there's multiple things that can influence that. And this can be very simple. If you are a team captain and you want to start influencing your team, getting going, if you're down a little bit or anything like that, you can use this process and better understand it on how to actually portray meaning and get meaningful comments out to your individuals within your team. You guys have any questions on that, or are you good to go? Okay, awesome, thanks. All right, I have a question for you. What is the overall goal of communication? That's right. Yeah, it's a shared understanding. So shared understanding is what we try to get through to people when we communicate. It could be anything. You can have many communications throughout the day, and each one of them you're trying to have shared understanding. So whether that's in your physics class, whether that is with your coach or your trainer or your family, it's all different, and all of them have different languages. So when you talk to your trainer, you have to understand the language of physical therapy and physiology, different things like that. When you're talking to your coach, you have to understand the techniques that you are going through in your sport. If you're talking to your family, you have to try to encode different uh, those different things that you talk about with the trainer, with your coach, and try to portray them to your family. So you have to encode those in different ways that your parents can actually understand, so that if they don't understand all the technical speak. So that's what we try to do. We try to get a shared understanding across the spectrum. Some things that you have to do is, when you're encoding that message, is consider the impact that you're going to have on your audience. So if you want to portray something to, we'll say, your parents, that practice isn't going well, that you're not seeing as much playing time, there's the tone of your voice, the inflection of your voice, the different things can have an effect on how you're transmitting that message. If you say it in a happy-go-lucky way, they're probably not going to think too much of it, and they're going to think you're okay, and they're going to get over it, just the way that you're trying to portray that message. So, or you may get negative feedback from that. They may tell you to suck it up. They may tell you to do it with some other things. So you have to be very careful of how that message is going to get received, because one message can mean many different things to many different people. It's how you encode it and send it and transmit it to those individuals that they may get a certain reaction because of that. So you have to be very careful of how you actually package up your communication and you deliver it. Now that can be through video, that can be through text, that can be through social media. However you're packaging it up, you have to be very careful, because certain people can take things different ways. So some things to consider when you're delivering your message is who you're delivering it to and what you're delivering. Is it new, or are you trying to reinforce it? And this goes for coaches as well. If coaches are delivering a new message to a team that's completely different from the past, they may have to deliver it a little different than something that's reinforcing. If it's reinforcing, they can be very blunt, very quick about it. If you are trying to instill something that's new, you may have to take your time. You may have to look back, step back, and portray that message a little different way. So because it takes time to actually sink in. I'll give you an example of this. On my college basketball team, we had a completely different language than any other basketball program I've ever been around. For instance, we had a play, and we had many different things because we ran a motion offense. But my coach would, in front of the other team, say, George Washington, Big Bomber Rudy. And that was actually a play that we ran. To normal people, that doesn't mean anything. No one has any idea what that means. We could freely talk on the court, and the other team looked completely confused. But we had our own language. We had a way of portraying that to one another, that we could just talk and we could run and play. The bad part about that is when you're a freshman and you have to learn it. We had about 5 pages of words that we had to learn that meant one thing, like backdoor cut was something else on our team. A slip was something else. A double screen meant something else. But they kind of made sense after a while. We kind of got the hang of it. But it was very difficult to learn that new language for basketball. But it allowed us the freedom to freely communicate on the court. One day we weren't really communicating very well, and our coach even told us, hey, no more communication. We couldn't do nonverbal, we couldn't do verbal. So we literally couldn't talk, we couldn't make hand gestures, and we had to try to run our offense. it was extremely difficult to run a motion offense in basketball if you can't communicate. So within 5 minutes, we asked if we could just start communicating again. And I'll tell you, the rest of the season, that happened in preseason. The rest of the season, we communicated really well. Didn't do very as well. We finished about 500, but overall, we communicated very well, especially on defense. But even getting a drink of water when we couldn't communicate was pretty difficult to get the managers over to us that we needed water. So it definitely was a learning experience, that's for sure. So barriers. We want to talk about barriers in communication. If you're trying to portray to someone and get someone fired up, get someone ready to go, and they're extremely tired, or to run a play and it's in the fourth quarter, or if it's in overtime, and you're trying to portray something, you have to be very clear to them because fatigue is a barrier that gets between you and the receiver. So it really hinders communication. So looking at that fatigue, taking that into consideration, and that's both coaches and players that really need to take fatigue into account when they're trying to portray something. Crowds. There is such a thing as home court advantage. Unless you were on our basketball team, who was actually a better away team because we actually got to sleep at night. That was one of the things. If you are if you have that home court advantage and you have that crowd noise, or that's huge. I'm a big Penn State football fan, and the whiteout games that they always do every year. The crowd noise, they try to disrupt the communication between the coaches and the players on the field. So that is an absolute barrier. Equipment can be a barrier. That football is another example with that. It's the helmets. You can't hear very well. You can hear better than you used to, but I put a football helmet on in high school, and just trying to hear, understand. Your vision is, with the helmet, the vision is impaired just a little bit. So understanding that equipment can absolutely be a barrier in your communication. So you have to understand all of these different things in order to portray your message accurately. But the one thing I will give to you guys is the fatigue. That's one of the biggest things that athletes don't take into account is fatigue. You can feel fatigued, and I know everybody knows how they feel when they're fatigued. It is extremely difficult to comprehend things. You just want to get that next breath, and that's where you really need to focus. And if you're a leader of that team, or even just a team member, you still have that role, and you still have to be able to push through that and know how you can effectively communicate when you are absolutely exhausted. So that's one thing I definitely want you to take away from this discussion of all the influences that the influences on communication. So the last thing I want to talk about with you guys today is body language. Body language in sports is huge. So one of the things that I used to look for all the time when I was an athlete was the body language of my opponent. So when I played basketball, as I said earlier, we ran a motion offense, and we ran it and we ran it and we ran it. And a lot of times we used the 35 seconds of the shot clock, and we tried to wear teams down. And that was just our way of doing it. But how did we know that we were wearing teams down? Well, we looked at their body language. Their body language could tell us exactly how they were doing mentally and physically throughout the game. They started to get frustrated. So the one time that one of the best examples I have is when we played UConn, and they were the number one team in the nation. Now they just got back from winning the Maui Invitational, and we knew that we had a feeling that maybe they would be a little jet lagged, which is probably why they scheduled us for the next game. But we were ready to go out and run our offense against them. They were more athletic, they were more physical, they were more talented, but we ran our offense like crazy against them, and they were absolutely exhausted. You could tell that they were just getting so frustrated by having to go through screen after screen after screen. Now these are big and some of the best players in the world, and they were just getting fed up with getting screened constantly. So even the best players can get really frustrated. We ended up losing by 9 points, but to that point, that's not too bad of a loss. Moral victory, but we don't like moral victories. But it was a good experience for us, and you could just see their body language. And they even said on the foul line the one time, I mean, you guys just don't stop running, and it was true. We don't, and we never did. So looking at body language, and if you look at some of these pictures, some of them are some nonverbal communication with the body language. You know, how did you are you putting your hands on your head? Are you putting your hands on your knees? Are you putting your hands on your hips and looking, you know just kind of tired. Or look at Hope Solo. Now, I picked that picture because that was, at a key point in the match probably, and representing Team USA. She looks very determined. She looks like you're not getting a ball past me, and I think that it's huge. Now, if you look at the picture I have of the Arkansas Razorbacks basketball team, everybody's been there on the bench. Everybody understands what it's like at the end of a game. But that may not be the end of the game. I'm just making that assumption because it looks like they're down by about 30. And they could be up by 15. But the body language says a lot of the team. And you always want to be engaged when you're on the bench. So if you have bench calls, if you have different things like that, you want to make sure that you're fully engaged because then that tells the coach that you're ready to go in and play. I would argue that only one of those guys may be ready to go in and play, and it's the one that's closest to where the coach would normally sit, with just the jersey on with no towel or anything like that. But the other guys leaning back, things like that, that's the wrong message you want to send to your coach. That's the wrong message you want to send to your teammates that are on the floor because they're looking over to you for encouragement. They're looking over to you for that support to keep going. So even when you're on the bench, body language matters, and the other teams look at that too. I can tell you that the other teams will look at that and say, look, their body language, they're not in it, they're not ready to go. So you have to be very self-aware of what you're communicating when you have your hands on your head, when you're leaned back in the chair on the bench, if you have the towel over your head. Be very aware of that. And it's very important. It's a weakness that a lot of people have, and that a lot of people have to change. So it's very important for you to understand that. So I hope you've enjoyed today's presentation. I hope that you guys have something to take away from this. And good luck in your careers. I think you're going to do really well. And it was a pleasure. So if you guys ever need anything, please take my card, and I'll be happy to talk with you guys later on. So good luck with the rest of the tournament, and I'll talk to you guys soon.